the question I got for today is how do I improve Netflix, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just before answering the question, I want to sort of clarify some of the things in the question. When you say Netflix, are we talking about the whole Netflix platform, or are we looking at specific, like say the web product or the mobile product?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. Like Netflix has so many services. We are specifically looking at, just the viewing experience. So the viewing experience on Netflix. So we're not really considering, um, all the for example, let me see. We're not really considering, for example, like hardwares that we kind of give people to use with Netflix, or like anything else. So just really focusing on viewing experience. By viewing experience, let's just maybe look at big screens. So like at least laptop or TV, but not like mobile.
Laptop, TV, how about like iPad? So those kind
Yeah,
of large
counts.
screens.
That counts too.
Okay, so we're looking at improving the viewing experience for laptop or the large screen devices, right?
Yeah, larger screen devices.
Mm-hmm. And when we talk about improve, do we have any specific goals in mind? I have something in mind. For example, we want to, as you mentioned, it's the viewing experience. So I would assume that the top thing in my mind is we want to improve the user experience of using Netflix. And do we have any other goals in mind, or is this the primary goal for us?
Yeah, we want to improve user experience and hopefully, like drive more engagement. And if they have a better experience, we might also have more people who subscribe to our memberships or view on our platform. So like kind of new user acquisition as well. But yeah, those will be like kind of sideline goals, and we think those might be able to be achieved by improving the viewing experience.
Okay, so to repeat what you just said, you're saying that the user experience is our primary goal, and we want to sort of improve the user experience so that we can drive more engagement. But in the same time, we also want to improve membership and thus monetization, or maybe new user acquisition, because we are providing a better user experience. Is that correct?
Yep, totally.
Okay. I'll take user experience as the primary goal, and I'll also think about monetization and acquisition on the side.
Okay,
Sounds good to you?
cool.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. And then also, since you mentioned that we want to improve the user experience, do we know what is not working right now? Or do we have any information about users' complaints? I mean, I can definitely dig deeper later on when I'm talking about the problem space, but I'm wondering if you have any information right now.
Yeah, I think that's open for you to explore.
Okay. Sure. Problems is basically, oh, by the way, I forgot to share my screen. Just 1 second.
Okay.
Oh.
It's okay. Like starting here is okay.
Sure. Okay. So, wait. Give me a second. Okay, yeah. So we've just gone through the goals, and I'm also wondering whether we have like kind of like company-specific mission to consider. I assume Netflix is just trying to bring the best entertainment experience to the user, whether through offering the best contents or offering the best viewing experience. Do you have any other thing in mind when it comes to Netflix mission?
Yeah, we definitely want to, bring more innovative and meaningful content to people. But here, I think we are not really caring about content that much. So those are, like taken care by another team. So our team really just focus on how do people, interact with Netflix web, or, maybe their portal on their large screen devices, and how do we give a better experience for them.
Okay, sure. I guess that's enough information for me to get started. To tackle this question, I would like to start with basically understanding our current problems better, basically digging deeper into the potential user segments as well as their use cases or their pain points. And then I'll start thinking about how do I prioritize on certain user group and use cases, depending on our objectives here. And moving on, I'm gonna sort of talk about the potential solutions and propose a prioritized solution based on certain metrics or criteria. And if we still have time, I'm gonna talk about the success metrics in terms of how do we measure and track the success of this new improvement changes. And maybe also talk about the risk and trade-offs here. Does this sound good to you?
Sounds good to me.
Sure. I'm gonna spend some minutes to just draw down my thoughts on my, the user experience.
Okay.
Thanks. So the initial way that I can think about in terms of dividing our user groups are basically by the way they sort of engage or the extent of engagement they have with the Netflix platform. So I listed 3 buckets here. So the casual watchers, the show followers, and the binge watchers, just for information. So for the casual watchers, I'm referring to those people who might regularly go back to the platform and just watch whatever that is presented to them. They don't really care what they watch. They just want some kind of off time and get entertained. So, they do have like a relatively frequent check-in, frequent or non-frequent check-in. So it's pretty random and don't care about contents. And then there's also the show followers, which basically have a really clear preference over the contents. And they might, just follow, because TV shows, the most typical way is to be updated like periodically, for example, weekly. So I'm assuming they're basically just sticking to follow the specific show on a regular basis, or maybe they're watching a old TV show from time to time. And the clear difference with the last group, which is binge watchers, is that the show followers don't really, binge watch. So that brings me to the third point. So binge watchers refers to those people who maybe seldom watch, but whenever they watch, they sort of finish the whole thing. I seldom do that, but I know that there are people, so there are just binge watchers. So I would say myself, I'm like between the second and third. Sometimes I follow a show, and when I have time and the mood, I might binge watch the whole show. But most often, I'm the second type. So those are the 3 user segments that are in my mind right now when it comes to Netflix typical users. Do you think this is a good segmentation, or do you want another way to segment them?
Yeah, I think this is a good segmentation, but I just have a little bit of question. So between casual watchers and binge watchers, what do you think are the differences between these 2 groups?
Yeah, so your question is about the difference between casual watchers and binge watchers, right? Yeah, so I think a very prominent difference is that casual watchers, they never binge watch. They don't care about finishing the whole show. They only, like, for example, you have like 30 minutes or like 2 hours off time per day, and then they just spend this time watching whatever content that is presented or recommended on the front screen. And whereas for binge watchers, they might, for example, take a whole day off of a week just to finish the favorite show of them. So the passion and the preference over the content is much more than the casual watchers. Does it make sense?
Yeah, totally makes sense. One more question would be, for binge watchers. So I understand that there is a difference between like show followers and binge watchers, but do you think like the binge watchers are like a subgroup of the show followers? Or if not, why do you think so?
Well, definitely those 3 groups or the 2 groups you were talking about, they were not completely exclusive. But I wouldn't say that it's a subgroup, because here we're dividing users by, for example, the passion, the the preference over the contents, like the kind of user behavior that is here. So the reason why we divide them is to basically go deeper into their user journey, their use cases later on, so that we can develop a better product for specific user segment. So I would say, like, for binge watchers, I may care more about how do we create a smoothless experience so that they can binge watch to the best experience they can think about. Whereas for show followers, we might want to point them to their favorite show in a shortest period of time, or shortest user journey, so they can sort of achieve their objective as soon as possible. So
yep, sounds good to me.
Cool. So if you don't have any further questions, I might want to sort of prioritize on a specific user segment based on some certain criteria. Does it sound good to you?
Yep.
Great. So before I dive into my criteria, I'm wondering if like Netflix has any preference over how do we want to prioritize users. For example, it could be like the total impact, or depending on our primary goal is user experience. So by default, I want to measure like how big is the gap between the current experience and ideal experience for each user segment. So that's basically like the user pain, I would say, as a primary criteria that I would use. But is there anything else that you want me to look at?
I think, yeah, you are free to look at it yourself.
Sure. Let me see. Prioritization, the pain, and scale. So basically, pain refers to, as I said, how large the gap is, which we measured in more depth when we were talking about the use cases, whereas scale refers to, let's say, the number of people in this specific group. Because I think as combined, that basically bring us like the total user experience improvement that can be potentially achieved. So looking through the whole three segments, I think casual watchers, they're possibly the largest group of users. And also, because Netflix is so good at recommendations, I would assume for casual watchers, it's relatively already good experience. So I would say like the pain for them is not as high. Whereas for show followers, as I said, I'm actually a kind of a typical show follower. So I sometimes find it kind of distracting when Netflix is recommending all the contents, and I cannot find the show that I want to follow. So I would put that as a potential pain point killer. And then binge watchers, I think, again, if you want to sort of follow the whole show so far, you can always just continue playing. So I think that pain point is not as obvious. And also binge watchers are relatively a small group of people. So from the top of my head, I would prioritize show followers just because like there's specific, they still take a chunk of the group, but also the current recommendation system doesn't really work that well for people who have specific objectives over the contents they want to watch.
Okay.
Does it make sense for you?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Great, then I'm gonna put show follower as the user group that I want to focus on. And I put show followers. And now I'm gonna brainstorm a little bit about the user journey and think about the ways we could improve, if that's okay with you.
Yep.
Great. So I briefly went through the typical user journey of using Netflix as a show follower. So and come up with some kind of pain points that is in the process. So I'm gonna walk you through through my thought process. So I mean, as a typical Netflix user, you start with picking the content you want to watch. It could be clicking on a button on a thumbnail in the home page, or you could search for some certain contents, but you pick the contents first, and then you start watching. Which is an immersive experience. And after watching, you might want to find the, like there's a follow-up part of the journey where you might sort of choose the next show to watch, or you just quit. So the first stage, which is pick the content, I think for show followers, as I mentioned, because the current interface is so recommendation driven, which we can understand because Netflix want to maximize the experience for the casual watchers and keep them engaged in the platform as long as they can. But for show followers, sometimes, as in my own example, I might get overwhelmed by all the recommendations that is given, but not really having clear focus on what I want to watch. I'm assuming, based on my past experience, I'm assuming Netflix still doesn't have a, like for example, a favorite button or a, follow button that can sort of mark those shows as the shows that I'm following. So I might just come back to this as a potential solution later on. But in general, here at this point, I think the problem is it is really hard to navigate to specific shows in the current recommendation center interface. And the second thing about watch, I think just because Netflix focusing so much on providing the best viewing experience on a recommendation basis, almost all watching experience is pretty generic, which is basically you start watching the show and you don't get like surrounding information because we don't know, or Netflix doesn't know that you're following a specific show. So here, I think we are lacking some kind of background information about the show, or maybe specifically when you are following a show, you sort of want to know what happens in the previous plots. Coming back to my previous point about the difference between show follower and binge watchers. Show followers, they're following the show on a periodic basis. They don't binge watch. So it's really often that they sort of forget the previous plots, or the general background or details of something. I think it will be really helpful to have some support during this stage. And the last point in terms of follow-up, I think, again, because it's such a generic step, the current primary goal is to take the user to the next content that they might be interested in. But as a show follower, you definitely, after watching the show, you sort of have some questions in mind. You sort of want to understand more about something. You want to know the news or something. So I think there's a potential here to provide more context or support information for the user. So those are the three main pain points that I came up with when it comes to a typical user journey for show follower. Do you have any questions on that?
No, I think those are all good.
Great. So if that's the case, I might want to sort of go to the solution step, because we only have like three pain points here. I would like to see whether I can propose something that can address like all of them, or do you think I should sort of focus on one of them first?
That's up to you.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'll try to sort of sample a design for a new user journey that is specifically designed for show followers.
Okay, cool.
Great. So I'm gonna quickly spend some time to brainstorm the features I want to include before giving you a more specific design that is in my mind. So on top of my mind, in order to address the previous 3 points, I have 3 features in mind. The first one is called the show I'm following. So basically, it involves 2 major components. One is on any thumbnail, you will now have a option to follow. Like there's like a small plus icon on the corner of the thumbnail, and you can just click on that in order to indicate you're following this show. Or alternatively, when you're actually on the show page, like the profile page, there is a button that allows you to follow this show. And then there will be also a tab on the front page which you can click on, which is called the shows I'm following. That will sort of centralize all the shows that you're following. So next time you log into Netflix, you will be easy to really click into this tab and check all the shows that you're following. Cool. And the second feature I'm proposing is called hints. So that could be a small icon on the corner of the screen while you're watching the show. And the whole function of this feature is to provide context-related background info to the user whenever it is needed. So for example, some shows like Sherlock, that really involves a lot of thinking and also knowing the background information. So whenever the user is lost, they can click on like a small question mark or something at the corner, and we will prompt related previous background information or plots as a short abstract to provide more help. And that could, I think that could create a more coherent experience for the user in terms of the show following experience. And the third thing I would like to propose is called Show Wiki. So it's basically the third step that I was talking about in terms of follow-up. Instead of directly taking the user to the next show, we might want to sort of provide some kind of related info, for example, a plot analysis, like an article that is analyzing the plot that just happened in the show or in the episode, or some kind of user reviews, and so that user can know like what others are thinking about the show. And the third thing, it might be like a news or some kind of information about the next season or the next episode, so they can sort of keep engaged or expecting what is going to happen following this episode. So I think those 3 are the top 3 features that I have in mind. Do you have any questions on them?
Yep, I think those are all great features. Just for the first one, I think currently we do have like the feature of adding to my list. And it functions pretty similarly like what you said. In the thumbnail or in the like profile page of the show, we'll have like a plus and then a plus sign where you can click onto it and then it will be added to your list. And then when you go to the homepage of Netflix, there'll be a tab saying My List, and when you click onto it, we'll have all those. So I think it's a good one. But since we already have it, let's see. Maybe if you choose, let's have you choose between the second and the third solution. How would you? Because I think those are all great features. However, maybe we have limited manpower, so we can only do one of them. How would you choose in between these 2?
Sure. So we're talking about potential prioritization here. Before moving on to the specific rationale, I think I would like to share with you my criteria in terms of prioritization. I guess the first thing is the user benefits, or put it alternatively, as I mentioned in the beginning, it's going to be the like how big the pain point is, or how well we can actually bridge the gap. So I'll just call it user benefits for now. And the second thing is the implementation cost. So I'll take those 2 into consideration. Looking at the hint function, so we just want to provide more context-related background info. To me, I think that is solving the pain for some shows. For us, for the shows that are relatively independent between episodes, that is not really as worthwhile or valuable. But for some of the shows that are more coherent when it comes to the plot, that is. So I would say the user benefits here is kind of middle. It's not top because we're not satisfying everyone. And when it comes to the implementation cost, this is potentially Netflix could work with the show providers or the show producers, and to get more, either from a technological perspective, like you can do AI machine learning analysis and then extract some of the key information, or you can just directly work with the producer to get some of the context information. And that's the implementation cost that is going to be involved from a technical perspective. If you don't go with the technical route, this is a relatively easy implementation as well. Whereas when you look into Show Wiki, I think the benefit is also obvious because for for some type of contents, people always have questions. It's not really like, for example, the dramas. People always have a lot of questions after watching them. But for some, like the entertaining ones, like the kind of a comedy, people don't really have anything to ask or question. So similar to the hint point, I think this is also partial. I would say the user benefits is similar. But then when it comes to the implementation cost, I think that's a different story, because we already have a lot of other platforms that do this well. Like, for example, IMDb or Rotten Tomato. Like, you have a lot of users, giving reviews there. So it's relatively hard for Netflix to build the contents from 0 to 1. If we do like get the chance to build a good relationship or cooperation with those platforms, that's going to be a different story. But I'm assuming that the collaboration will be relatively difficult, because those are like the brain and butter of those platforms. So from that perspective, I would say, because the two have similar user benefits, but the hints relatively have a smaller implementation cost, I'm going to go with that one. Does that sound good to you?
Yep.
Sure. If that's the case, I think following up, we can either, I could draw up a wireframe of the design to give you a picture of how it might look, or we can dive deeper into like the success metrics and the risk. Which one do you prefer?
Yeah, could you just maybe give me the core features that you want to implement with this? So like, just tell me on a high level how it will look like, what are the things that you need to build to enable this, and then we can move on to success metrics.
Sure. I think from a high level, the description of the experience will be like this. So for specific shows, again, as I said, not necessarily every show would have this need for a context-specific or context-rich info. For specific shows, let's say a drama show, like a Sherlock, first of all, you will have certain timestamps on the whole progress bar that has like the option of checking the hints, because obviously it's not possible to have the hint every second of the show. So you're going to only prompt whenever there is a need, and we can do that manually or algorithmically, depending on what the solution we want to do. And then once the user go to that timestamp when they're watching, there will be a small icon on the right corner, or any corner. I guess right corner is the best one, on the screen, like as a question mark, and then pop up. It's not going to be too big or too intrusive, so that it doesn't really interrupt with the current viewing experience. But user will notice that, and then they will have the option to hover on above of that or click on that, so that they will have like a small chat window showing them some kind of pictures or words or sentences reminding a related plot that has happened in the past, or maybe a background information. For example, this is the 19th century and we have the specific laws or something like that. So that would give them the related context information. So on a high level overview, you have specific time points, and then you have a small icon popping up that can be clicked into a window telling you more about the current plot.
Okay, that sounds great, but I just have several questions. So firstly, you mentioned that, okay, we're only doing shows so we're only doing it for context-rich shows, or like certain shows. So I get that part, but okay, how would you choose? So after, so you know that we need to display some information to the users. How do we get that information? Do Netflix ourselves provide that? Does the show provide that? Like, who is responsible?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I touched upon that a little bit when I was talking about the implementation cost. So I was saying that we can either do that algorithmically. So meaning that I know there are different ways for Netflix to gauge people's interest at different time of the episode. So supposedly we can sort of target at those high popularity points where like people are most concentrated on, and sort of support that with some kind of web search. So like if we can do kind of semantic understanding about the current plot, and then put those keywords into a search engine and return some related words as a reference. So that way we can do that much more in a much more scalable way, which means we can do that for a lot of shows in the same time, in a short period of time. but the accuracy of the recommendation will be relatively low because you're just basically returning search engine results. And the way is to do like a manual curation. So we are working with specific show producers and sort of piloting this new feature. So they're providing us with what kind of contextual information they think are most useful for the viewers. And we're basically just demonstrating that. The cost of this will be relatively higher, but it can definitely guarantee a much better user experience. We can even charge for that as a premium service or feature as a Netflix user.
Okay, cool. Sounds great to me. So yeah, let's move on to success metrics.
So I'm gonna propose a few and then also prioritize one single one, and the most important one as a North Star matrix, if that sounds good to you.
Okay.
Great. So there are 4 metrics that are in my mind, and I'm going to walk you through them first. The first thing is relatively straightforward. I want to measure the number of people who actually click on the hint icon. So as I said, assume we actually launch this feature and there's going to be a small icon popping up whenever there is a context-specific reach information. We want to see how many people actually click on that. And the second thing is the amount of time people stay on that hint window. So I was basically, once they click on the icon, there's a window popping up. There will be a way for them to sort of exit, or when they click on the other part of the screen. And then we want to see how much time they actually stay on the window on average. That basically demonstrates as the user's interest or how much they're actually using this information, this part of information. And the third thing is more like the total retention of show followers. So by retention, I basically mean that among all the users who have started following a show, how many people actually like stay towards the end of the show, like they actually finish the show. So I would assume the better show following experience we can provide, the more people will gonna stay on watching a specific show. And that naturally brings me to the fourth point, which is the amount of time people spend on following shows. Because sometimes even though they don't follow the whole show, by providing a better show following experience, they will sort of spend more time on following specific shows. So I would like to look at that as well. And among the 4, I think I'm going to look at the first one as the North Star matrix, because that directly measures how many people are actually using this product feature and how engaged people are when it comes to whether this feature is providing value. And all the other 3 metrics are sort of providing a supplementary value for us to see how useful it is. Does this sound good to you?
Cool. Sounds great. Yeah, let's wrap it up here.
Sure.
你有什么想法？
好，我没计时，我刚不是点了吗？你看了时间吗？
我大概是不到40分钟。
OK， 那还是挺长。
对。
我有什么想法？我想法就是，我的点不是特别多，然后，但是内容上来说，我觉得还 OK。然后再就是我对 Netflix 了解不是特别多，包括那个 list
对，但这个不是一个大问题，我觉得。
然后我现在 looking back 的话，我发现我可能没有太多 link back 到那个 acquisition 和 monetization。我中间非常快速提到了一个 premium feature， 这可能跟 monetization 挂钩，但是
那不是我们的 like goal， 所以我觉得你就是讲 experience 也是可以的。
对，我的意思是说，最后没有真正的 follow up 去提说我们怎么样能够提到这个。然后，对，我觉得主要还是就是说中间几个点可能挖的不是足够深和广，但是 general structure 应该还是 OK。
对，我觉得 structure wise definitely good。你往上 scroll 一下，我这边也记了一些，我觉得一开始问的问题挺好，就是具体 improve 啥，对吧？然后 what's the objective？我们有没有一个 specific problem that we want to improve？还有一些 company level goals。然后我觉得甚至我那个地方也可以会问说有没有 specific 想要 improve 的user 之类的。就是可能可以再问细一点，但是这个我觉得不是大问题。然后后面分的，我一开始没有特别，就是我觉得说，就是对我一开始觉得说需要一点 clarification to really get，就是你这3个到底区别，或者是 like how they're different。但是我觉得你的 justification 给的挺好的，所以 I think it's good。我看一下，然后 prioritization 我觉得没什么问题。show followers， 然后你就 go with show followers。我觉得，可能一个点是，我觉得你讲的时候不错，但是，你一开始你说你要 walk through user journey。但其实就是怎么说呢？就我可以看出来你给的点就是 pick the content, watch and follow up 是 like 他们 different stage at user journey， 但是你讲的时候并没有跟我 highlight 这一点。你懂我什么意思吗？就是
什么意思？
就是你并没有告诉我说你是，比如说你上来之后你说我 walk through 他的 user， 就你没有告诉我他的 user journey before you dive into the pain points。
我不是最开始就是说，我说 they pick the contents and then start watching and then
对，但是我的意思是，就是你讲每一个 pain point 之前，你应该说这个是哪一个地方的 pain point，就是 like
OK，
你 kind of 我觉得 assume 了说我会一直 stay focus on 你把它放在了这下面。你懂我什么意思吗？对，我觉得这个是一个比较 subtle point，就是
我是记得我好像讲到每个 point 的时候，我有提说就是 like for example, after finishing the first point, I said, okay, so during the watch stage and during and after this during the follow up stage 是
对，但
不够
是我觉得
清楚。
对我来说不太清楚。
OK，明白。
对，就是比如说你 finish 了一个 point 之后，可能我在记我自己的笔记，我在帮你记。然后你 finish 了一个 point 之后，我就觉得说，你就已经讲到下一个 point，然后我不是很清楚说，
怎么衔接过来的？
就是
OK，
对，我觉得衔接上可以好一点，因为我觉得可能你会 assume 大家已经在看你的这个东西，kind of。然后另外一个就是我觉得像你说 no follow up info，这个你其实可以写的更细，就是因为你 effectively 写 follow up 跟 no follow up info 就是2个同样的点。
对，我有时候写 notes 有这个纠结，就是我 somehow like 我会 prioritize 我说的内容，但是如果我花太多时间去把写的这部分展现的很清楚的话有 communication 会有 gap， 所以
对
，yeah，
对，我觉得这个是比较难 prioritize 的。对，就是
而且就是有些时候很 awkward，就是有些东西你不知道怎么讲，比如说到那个地方 follow up 这一块，我不知道怎么样，就是很容易说我不小心就把 solution 给说出来了。我当时就是写的时候，我有写到。
就是我觉得可能另外一个我想说你的 stage 为什么当时会对我来说没有那么 clear，就是可能你是可以说就是 before they are watching, when they are watching and after they watch it。
OK，
我觉得这样就会 clearer， 就是我觉得可能这是 what I'm trying to get to， 就是比如你一开始上来就跟我说when they are picking the content， 对 OK 就是这个 OK， 然后 like when they are watching，然后后面就是they need follow up， 然后我就觉得已经直接到了那个 pain point， 你懂我什么意思吗？就我以为那个已经是 pain point，
对
你
说这个 before during after 是一个 much more familiar 的 mental structure， 你觉得这个
对，我觉得是刚刚是这个点可能让我觉得说特别衔接上不是那么对，就是没有让我觉得说你是在按照，因为你先跟我the fact is 你先跟我说了你是用 user journey 来分，然后我并没有觉得说它是一个很是 like user journey 之类的。然后solution， 所以我觉得 solution 挺好，就没有什么问题。我觉得我唯一的一个问题 solution 的可能是 prioritization 的地方。就是我当时其实如果有时间，我会问你为什么你觉得第2个的 implementation cost 比第3个要低。因为我如果分的话，我可能会把第2个的 implementation cost 分的比第3个高。因为我觉得挺难去确定说 比如说你说 search， 对，你跟我说就是你可以 algorithmic， 就我觉得如果你让 show providers 给你，这个是 OK 的，但是如果你 algorithmic 做，我觉得挺难的，就你 search 你 return 啥呢？就是你在哪 search 呢，对吧？然后你 return 结果是不是 accurate？ 就
不是哦，你哦 OK，
你懂我什么意思吗？就是呀，然后我就觉得说 show wiki 那个感觉反而是更容易的，就是你只要比如说把别的平台的有的东西接过来。
对，但是就接这个事情本身，我当时那个 assumption 就是说接这个东西你不能直接爬嘛，你必须得通过
对对
你通过 API 就有合作。然后我刚刚的意思就是说IMDb 这种平台就是跟 Netflix 合作的话，因为那是他们的 bread and butter。对，
所以我觉得可能不是 implementation cost， 而是 competitor， 就是 whether there are already people who are doing this。我觉得
就我 somehow 把这种 cost 也包含进来了，懂我意思吗？就比如说合作成本，对，合作啊，然后你要怎么样去communicate 和 motivate 对方去跟你合作，这个东西。
对，所以我觉得 prioritization 这里其实比起你说 user benefit 跟 implementation cost 更好的就是说 implementation cost 跟 existing competitor 或者 existing party who are already doing this。因为你 user benefit 你跟我讲了一堆之后，你说的就是说这两个都有 user benefit， 然后虽然说你第二个可能比第三个的要稍微多一点，但是这个东西你也很难讲嘛。
user benefits 我基本上是说的两个差不多，
对啊，
就是因为都是 partial 的，然后这个就是我 somehow 就是总是要能够 align 一边，然后另外一边有层次才行，如果两边都差不多就不行了，所以我就 somehow 我觉得这就是很玄学了，就是 like product interview 才 specific 的，如果真正情况下的话，我肯定不会这么拍脑袋做事情。
对，
所以我就是 somehow 就是讲故事的时候先说他们俩其实 benefit 差不多，然后 后者这个 cost 比前者高，所以我选第二点。当然你说的点有意思，就说实话，你刚说那些点，就是如果我现在想说第二点的话，我大概就是用你那些点了，就是我说你要 implement search， 然后你要 implement every step， 然后第三点我可能就是 assume we're gonna a different way of saying this. We are gonna assume that it's relatively easy to collaborate with IMDb because we are bringing more traffic to IMDb information. And IMDb
我觉得也讲第二个点其实也是可以的，你可以说 implementation cost wise， 就是虽然说第二个可能会比第三个低一点，但是第三个的话，因为已经有很多人在做了，所以你觉得说就是 it's much more meaningful if we can provide the user like a innovative experience，就都可以的。然后包括你第二个，你也可以就是像你刚刚那么说嘛，就说就是其实你这个你有说就是 implementation cost also includes like corporation and they might be reluctant to give up the information. So it might actually be like a larger implementation cost, or even it could like it's not possible to be implemented like even. 所以你都可以这么说，对吧？所以其实还是可以把它绕回去的，我是觉得。
Innovation 这一块是可以放在 user benefit 里面，就是说我更 specifically 对比两者的话，那很明显。第二个这个更 innovative 一些。第三个的特点更多是就是 all in one 了嘛，就你传统你要去看完之后去 IMDb 查，现在就是在同一个地方就可以看到这个东西。
对，
也就是 convenience 的问题。
我觉得对，就这个是可能我一个一个想法。然后 success metrics 的话，我觉得总体没什么问题。我觉得可能我会去看就是within the people who are watching the shows， 就是 the shows that we have the hints。Like what's the percentage of them actually clicking into it？ 还有就是 instead of just looking at the absolute number， 这个可能是我会补充的一个，因为你看 absolute number 的话，你也不知道有多少人，就是有多少人 actually be exposed to that feature， 对吧
？Yeah， 我在想问，就 success metrics 就是你能说 number or percentage 吗？还是说你必须得 pick 一个？我没有这个经验，说实话。
我两个都说过，就是我有把它都就是有说过一个，也有说过就是like 两条，就是两条我都看，就是我看 absolute number， 我也看 percentage。
make sense。
对，我都有做过，对。
OK。
我觉得看当下 context make 不 make sense 吧？我觉得比如对这个题，我觉得 percentage totally make sense， 对吧？
肯定。
Yep。累了。
没有，我觉得挺好的。我觉得你有什么整体的 feedback 吗？
整体我觉得
包括 communication， 还有就是整个 flow 啊，还有比如说什么我打字的时候这个 waiting time 这样子。
我觉得没有什么大的，但是有一个点我刚刚突然想到的，就是 就是
eye contact
我不知道这个会是个 good thing 还是 bad thing actually，就是比如说你打完你的 pain point，因为我在看，其实我就会把你的都读完
，OK，
然后就是其实
就会分神，
都不用等你打到第2、第3个点，我已经在读完了。就是 I don't know whether this is a good thing or a bad thing actually， 就是 I think it can go both ways， 就是。
你还算是个 good interviewer， 很多时候有些 interviewer 就是你在打的时候就不看你了，就做别的事情去了，然后等你打完再过来看你。我不知道真正的那个 real interview 会怎么样。
但是就算他打完回来看你，他一扫，他其实就把3个点都扫完了。It doesn't take them too long to read like 3 sentences, right?
Yeah.
所以可能你第一个点还没有 finish saying， 他们就已经看完了。就是 I think this could really go both ways， 就是真的我不知道这个，
我觉得
对这个就比较难把握。
Yeah， 我到时候 test 一下吧，就是如果他当时让我问一个问题的话，我可能会问一下这个题。
Yeah， 但是对呀，就是
Well, actually, it's not a good question to ask.
我觉得我觉得不要问这个，但是 I've actually heard 就是 people saying that when they interview people。They appreciate 就是 like 他们觉得有这个 share screen， 他们更容易 follow， 然后他们觉得 in general 这种 share screen 的 participants the candidates 的表现 average 好像要更好一点。所以我觉得 maybe it's a good thing, but just 我只是一个 side notes， 对。
By the way， 那个我是因为我跟你讲过了，因为我里面电脑那个带不起，所以我到外面来了。所以整体来说，这样子一个 setup 你觉得 OK 吗？就我觉得那个 window 特别小，你知道你 share screen 的话，你的那个 Zoom window 会变得特别小嘛。然后
我觉得还好吧 ，Zoom 已经算很好了，就是已经不算那么小了。我觉得，就它会 actually 你 share screen 的话，现在 Zoom 的 default 是它会把它变成2个 screen， 你知道吧？我可以截给你看一下。
我是怎么截给你看的 ？OK， 都行。
就你 share screen 的话，是因为你是那个 share 的 person， 所以你的那个 screen 会特别小。这个我知道，就是 like 这个是
我的意思就是说，我这边看到的就是这2个小 window 在边边上。
我这边看到是这样的，所以 I don't know whether it's mine， 就是我觉得 Zoom 如果你是最新 updated， 它是 default 是这样的，它会自动帮你分屏。所以这样会好很多。
你这样好多了呀，对啊。但我的意思就是说，我自己因为你这个东西太小，所以我把它放到了同一块屏幕上。同一块屏幕上我就看不到这个摄像头。我翻过来的话，这个又太小了。Anyway， 就是
这个就是你要自己
所以你会觉得说 ，like 我全程过程中盯着前面这块屏幕没有看你这种感觉吗？你有 pay attention？
我觉得还好，我没有 I don't feel like。我也有在看你，所以 I don't feel particularly not engaged， 所以 I think that will be okay。就 at least 我刚刚没有觉得这个是一个问题。
OK，communication 呢？你觉得就是废话多吗？
我觉得还好，并没有很多。
我觉得我这个过程中面试最大的一个 improvement， 或者说我觉得 change， 就是说我在尝试让整个 communication 变得更 smooth， 就是更 natural，不管是语调还是内容的这样子一个 cover 的完整度。所以我也想尝试说看看听者的角度到底是什么样一种 feel。
我觉得，对，我觉得 communication in general 没有什么问题，就 I don't feel like there is red flags 或者就是我觉得不好的地方，所以我觉得应该还可以。对。
Anyway， 我真的不想 like overdo this， 但是我又 somehow 能，就中间有个 comment， 就不管是为了 interview 还是怎么样，我就是 communication 层面上来说，我一直都想 improve 的。就怎么样 get your thoughts out clearly and concisely， 然后让对方能够 see the same picture instead of just you talking about yourself 这种感觉。所以 anyway，
我觉得没问题，这个真的没有什么问题，我觉得。
我somehow还是觉得我会挂，但是 anyway 我就直接冲吧。
不要这么觉得，你可以的。
就看见你们，包括像那个小戴的 onsite 的 Google 了，我觉得挺不真实的。不过 Google 好像前面就只有1轮，那一轮过了就 onsite 了，所以
onsite 就前面就1轮。我不知道，我觉得 Google 这个 variation 好大，他们真的拼就是 like， 他们就 literally 就是 I don't know，
你有收到拒信吗？还是说你现在也什么都没有？我也什么
都没有。
我身边有人收到拒信了，然后那个谁又那个，我估计可能到最后是统一发1轮拒信吧，因为现在毕竟都已经到 onsite 了，估计可能性大。
不，但是好像 onsite 也是，他好像没有，对，他不是那种1天。 是啊，就
Lyft
它跟
Lyft 是
Uber
一个
Lyft 不一样。
OK，
Lyft 是这周二、周三是一轮，然后下周一周二是一轮，然后
什么时候
他们会全
出结果？
部面完啊。
什么时候出结果？
他们是全部面完之后他们说的是 end of next week， 他们会 later next week 会做 hiring review， 然后所有人一起看，然后再出结果。所以
OK，Good luck， 你肯定
谢谢
会拿到的。
谢谢，我不知道I don't know， 就我反正已经尽力了，就怎么样就这样了吧。
行，感谢。
没事，你要是后面周末还需要的话，我们就再约。
好，OK，到时候给你联系。
OK，
OK， 拜
行，那就
拜。
先这样，晚安，拜拜。
拜。